Él fue el fundador del grupo Paradigm Research Group en los Estados Unidos y desde el principio ha querido impulsar que en el Congreso norteamericano se tomen declaraciones a los más importantes testigos OVNI, se tengan en cuenta para poner en marcha acciones políticas transparentes y abiertas sobre esta cuestión. Su última iniciativa, la última iniciativa del Paradigm Research Group, es una iniciativa muy curiosa que a lo mejor podríamos copiar acá. Se llama Million Facts to Washington. ¿Tú? Ah, ¿no? No problema.
Is the mic on? Yes. Señoras y señores, buenos días. I must ask your pardon. I do not have the privilege or the pleasure to speak your language, so I must present today on inglés. Let's begin. Paradigm Research Group was formed in 1996 for the exclusive purpose of pursuing the advocacy of the UFO issue on a political basis, to achieve a resolution of this, at least fundamental resolution, regarding this phenomena. And it has done and attempted to do this by all means possible for 13 years. And the principal concept was one of what I call normalization, meaning this. The UFO ET phenomena is like any other issue, and it should be treated that way. Environment, nuclear proliferation, and all the other affairs of states and peoples. So, these other issues have lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and so this issue should have a lobbyist. And in 96, Paradigm Research Group registered with the Congress of the United States to lobby on the UFO ET issue and was the first to do so. This issue should have a political action committee. Therefore, in 1999, created the Political Action Committee, XPAC, to address the issue. It should be discussed in the political campaigns, particularly at the federal level for Congress. So in 1992, I was able to get on the ballot in the congressional election for the House of Representatives and debated the issue and brought it up in the context of that campaign with the other candidates. The eventual winner was Chris Van Hollen. And it should have a conference. So in 2004, we launched the X Conference, which was the first to deal with the UFO ET phenomena from a exopolitical perspective. Then in 2008, created the Exopolitics United States Network, followed by the Exopolitics World Network. Goal here was simple. This is a global issue, and exopolitics needs to spread. And that was happening, and so this was PRG's humble effort to help that process. Exopolitics World Network was a simple idea. One site per country devoted to exopolitics, Exopolitics Spain, Exopolitics France, and so forth. Volunteer, no funding for this. And the question was who would step forward to run these sites. Didn't know, went ahead, and wow, how wonderful. The people that came forward to create these sites and advance the issue in their country were extraordinary. Starting not least with Pep Bonhoeffer, who of course has created and runs the Exopolitics Spain website. And then we have others here today who are representing other sites, such as Jean-Charles Dubac, the pilot, and important witness we'll be talking about later. He is running the Exopolitics France and the Exopolitics United Kingdom site. David Griffin, he is here. Exopolitics Germany, Robert Fleischer is here. In fact, as again he did for the X Conference, he's live streaming this conference to the internet right now, and people around the world are watching this live. Right? Pretty cool. And then we have Frederick Guldahl is here, Exopolitics Denmark. And Uli Pajola, Exopolitics Finland, he is here. And I'm going to mention Uli a little bit. Uli is a new site. I've met him for the first time. Uli is a highly accomplished scientist in biology with many degrees, and also academic and a teacher, now retired. And he has stepped into this issue with great courage, created a site. This is not common for academics and scientists of this level to do this, but he did it. He had the courage. So he makes it easier for another scientist and another university professor to get involved and do the right thing. And so we're up to 17 countries, and it's growing. The fact is, exopolitics is growing in Europe much faster than the United States right now, and that's not surprising. And Europe is going to play a major role, of course, in all of this. So we have a lot of other countries. If you would like to have the Exopolitics site, create it, run it for your country, by all means get in touch with Paradigm Research Group. And then the Million Facts on Washington started in November 5, 2008. We'll talk about that later. It's the major project, probably the most important of PRG. And then hopefully later this year, maybe the winter, hope to launch the Paradigm News Daily, which is an attempt to create another media site, real media site, addressing this issue in a way that is very mainstream, so that we can start giving press credentials to a lot of the people in this field who are doing journalism, so they can get access to the White House maybe, and other venues and so forth with press passes. Now, 1947. 1947 was a big year in the United States, let me tell you. Many things happened. The National Security Act was passed, the CIA was created, and something else happened. That year, an organization called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists created a clock called the Doomsday Clock to bring awareness to the threat of nuclear war. It was a wonderful concept. Many of you know about it. And the idea was simple. If that clock strikes midnight, you've had a nuclear war, and you're in big trouble. All right? That's midnight on the Doomsday Clock. This image, this icon, that's lived with us, unless you're older than 62, 64, your whole life. What an amazing thing. It has affected us in ways we cannot imagine. So, when I launched the Paradigm Research Group website, I created another clock called the Paradigm Clock to bring awareness to this issue of the ET issue and its resolution. Now, midnight on the Paradigm Clock was disclosure. And disclosure in a carefully defined way. It's very specific. It's with a capital D. And it's the formal acknowledgement by the world governments of a non-human extraterrestrial intelligence from somewhere, doesn't really matter politically, engaging the human race. That's midnight on the Paradigm Clock. And the fact is that in a way, since 1947, we have been in a race to see which clock strikes midnight first. Will it be this clock? Will it be disclosure? Or will it be this clock? Will it be nuclear war? And as you know, the threat of nuclear war has not gone away. Those nukes are still in their place. They can be reassigned at any time, and they're starting to spread. And so, in 1947, something else happened, and that was the beginning of what I call the UFO era. Many countries in the world were aware something was going on because of the Foo Fighter phenomena, which was never explained, but there was a war happening, so it was not a high priority matter. But then, 47, this man, Kenneth Arnold, reported to the media seeing, and he was a very respected pilot, seeing 9 discs near Mount Rainier. And the era of the UFO was off and running. But something else started in 1947, the truth embargo. It informally began when this man, Roger Ramey, general at Fort Worth, ordered William Blanchard, the base commander at Roswell, to change this story. Essentially, the Roswell Army Air Force captures a flying disc on the ranch at Roswell, the most legendary and known event and this issue in the world easily, to change the story the next day to this. General Ramey empties the Roswell saucer. And that's followed by General Ramey ordering Jesse Marcel Sr., the intelligence officer, to present to the press what is clearly weather balloon material. Thus informally began the truth embargo. It solidified over the next 5 years and was well in place, fully formed by the end of 1952 in the Robertson panel. The question becomes, when will the truth embargo end? And it's very possible, I believe, it's going to end this year, and this man is going to be involved, perhaps. And so we have these two individuals, Roger Ramey and Barack Obama, bookends in history. We may find out very soon if that's the case. Now, let me digress just for a moment. There is a very good reason why I refer to what we've been discussing a lot this weekend as a truth embargo. It used to be called the UFO cover-up. Less and less you hear that. And I think that is appropriate. We need to use the right language. We need to approach these things in a way that is consistent with reality and the history. And my belief is that the decision by the United States government to withhold this information at the time was completely legal under the National Security Act. UFO cover-up implies a fundamental illegality, which then raises a whole lot of issues. That doesn't mean some illegal things weren't done over the years, but the fundamental act to withhold the acknowledgement of this issue was legal. So we're talking about a truth embargo. Now, the UFO era, which began in 1947, I believe, some disagree, but I think it's convenient to do this, ends in 1991. Now, the UFO era, the era in which the phenomena explodes, the citizens try to engage it, the government denies it, organizations are formed, OPRO, NICAP, MUFON, CUFOS, all of those, citing reports, people are writing books, forming organizations, meeting in libraries all over the country, trying to rack up all the information they can to make the case that what this is, to the government, to themselves. But that era basically was over by 91. I believe that the extraterrestrial presence behind UFOs was I think, confirmed under any reasonable logic and deduction by 1952, if not earlier. It was done. But, of course, there was a truth embargo on, so it wasn't resolved, was it? But if the government denies it, you continue to try to prove it. And this went on, and they proved it many times over. So by 1991, I think it was this cake was fully baked. And I end the era there. Why? Because something very important happened. And I refer to the end of the Cold War, which informally begins with the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, which I know all of you in Europe are quite familiar with, and then finally ends with the dissolution of the Soviet republics and the removal of the Communist Party on Christmas Day, 1991, one of the most important events in human history. That ends that era, and the reason it does, in my view, is that the number one reason why disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence, with a capital D, by any government, certainly the United States, was that with the Cold War underway and thousands of nuclear warheads pointed across the poles, their launch bringing, of course, the end of civilization, that the risk of bringing that issue into the mix was too much to take. There was potential it might destabilize the politics. It might create a need for a preemptive strike over a fear of extraterrestrial weapon race, and so forth. It's hard to argue with that. So until the Cold War over, there's no truth embargo does not end. But once it's over, it's a new ball game. Hope that translates. And that's why I end the UFO era then, and a new era begins. The era of exopolitics. Though we didn't have that word then. That word doesn't turn up in this context. Nobody even uses it all, I'm aware of, in any context, until 2000. So the era of exopolitics begins in 1991, and we are on the road at that point to the resolution of this issue. Now, we need new language. When you're going to have a major change in society, if you're going to move forward in a profound way, you always have to find new language that properly explains what's going on, and you can communicate what you're dealing with to each other. You can't go to a new place with old language. It's like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem created with a set of ideas without creating a new idea. Get outside the box. And so we started with the idea of politics of UFOs. That was a bridging concept. You see, politics, UFOs. Got the two there. And then that kind of morphed into the politics of disclosure. The disclosure term starts coming into play more around 1996, 1997. And then that evolves into Exopolitics, which emerges in 2000 thanks to a book written by Alfred Weber, who is here. And that term instantly, in my mind, was the right term. And I immediately embraced it and did what I could to advance that terminology into the marketplace of ideas. And, of course, many, many others have helped out. Michael Sala and others, everyone here at this conference, rather, has advanced it clearly. And here we are today at what I think may be the most important conference in this genre ever put on. So the truth embargo that starts at 47, when will it end? The UFO era ends in 91. Now we're into a new era. Truth embargo starts in 47. I believe it ends this year. I'm not a seer. I'm not Gene Dixon. I don't make prophecies. But I'm saying that based upon a lot of analysis and thought and assessment of what is going on, that the window is wide open this year. And it can happen this year. Probably not without some help from the people of the world, but even perhaps without it. But that is my assessment, and that's the principle under which I'm operating. Now, then let's talk about this truth embargo. Why? One of the reasons it's going to end this year is because there are huge pressures on it that have grown with each passing year. So I've taken the truth embargo, and I have, by purest coincidence, placed it in this diagram, which just happens to resemble the Pentagon outside of Washington, D.C. And let's talk about those pressures. The first one are the ETs. They come, they go. They do what they want. They fly here, they fly there. Tens of thousands of people that have had direct contact with them are coming forward. Their memories are leaking. They're reporting them, writing them out. They're in the press. They're in the media. These entities are being anything but discreet. And every time they're seen, every time a pilot sees one out a disc outside the window, every time there is a significant sighting like O'Hare, the awareness goes up, the pressure on the truth embargo grows. And so if these entities don't want us to tell ourselves that they're here, they sure aren't trying very hard to stop that process. And so their activity, unless they go home, they may all just leave, which would be awful. I would be very upset. So I hope they don't go home. But their activities are putting enormous pressure, and that's a simple fact. Now, the second thing is public awareness. The polling data for years now has shown that each year the awareness of the issue grows. The number of people that believe that UFO phenomena is extraterrestrial grows. The number of people who think that the government is lying grows every year. Now it's around 85%. Say, matter of fact, the government's not telling the truth. About 50% believe that UFO phenomena is ET in origin. About 20% believe they've had a sighting, a strong sighting. And about 10% say they've had direct contact with extraterrestrials. That's a phenomenal number, but that's what the polling say. And then there's Hollywood, bless its heart. And all of the media worldwide, they have had a feast on this issue. I'm sure you know that. And a simple way of putting that is this simple diagram, which shows, as of 2005, 10 of the top world-grossing movies in history deal with extraterrestrials. 10 of the top 31. And that has continued. The television shows one after another, and of course science fiction going back to the early part of the 20th century. It's everywhere. Awareness of this phenomena is universal. You could probably walk up to a rice farmer in Bangladesh and say, "Do you know what a UFO is?" And that person might very well say yes. Now, there's another major pressure on it, and it's called the multi-tiered media. Now, this is a phenomena that has developed very much in the last about 15 years. Media has become tiered. It's not one complex of top networks and major papers. There are cable channels and secondary papers and regional papers, and you've got magazines on these cable channels, and then you've got paranormal shows, and then you've got 3 levels of tabloids. You've got the high-end National Enquirer, you've got the second level like the Examiner and the Star. At the bottom end is the Sun and the Weekly World News, Jerry Springer Show. The real fun is down here. This is where it's all fun. But the point is that any story, no matter how controversial, no matter how exotic, if it can't get in the news here, it comes in here, or maybe here. And then it works its way up, if it's got legs, as we say, right? If it has traction, if it has power. And the way it works itself up is primarily over here, because all of these entities have their internet component, and this internet acts like an elevator between these levels. So if UFO story comes in here, jumps to here, then there, and turns up there. So this is putting huge pressure on all aspects of all issues in the world today, and the ability of people in power to, quote, control how individuals think about it. This is a good thing. There's consolidation and what have you, but it's a good thing. Then, probably the second most profound pressure on the truth embargo, with guaranteeing that it will end soon, is the witness emergence. And there have always been people coming forward, going back to 1947, right? But since the Cold War ends in 91, the emergence of witnesses, now these are individuals who have worked in government, in positions of authority, in political appointees, or even politicians, members of the military, members of civilian agencies, and so forth, who have come forward and said, I saw this, I did this, I know about that. And this testimony, when you look at it in the collective, points at one thing: extraterrestrials. These are courageous people with very few exceptions. They're absolutely solid, very persuasive, and trying to tell the truth as best they know it. And their numbers continue to grow. They are certainly in the hundreds by now. I want to mention two in particular. Colonel Gordon Cooper, the legendary astronaut, came out in the 70s and said, look, I've seen things, I know this is real, and tried to raise this issue as best he could. He was a great man in many ways, and this only made him greater, though I can assure you it did not make his life easier. And in the later years, he fell into Alzheimer's and was not able to pursue the issue right to the end. But his mantle was taken up by this gentleman, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14 astronaut who walked on the moon. This is another great man. And in the mid-90s, he started to say, talk about assert the truth as he saw it, that the ET presence is real, Roswell was real, and he continued to say it over and over again until the media finally began to pay attention. And that occurred in July. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Dr. Mitchell, I work with him closely, and I can say, matter-of-factly, that Dr. Mitchell, 77, he's had 2 cancers and a heart attack. He is committed to ending this truth embargo before he leaves this mortal coil. And I certainly am going to do my best to see that happens, and everyone else I know in this room and elsewhere doing the same. And just as a quick note, this is Gordon Cooper right here. In 1978, I believe, he went to the UN as part of an interest in UFOs that developed due to Grenada Prime Minister Sir Edward Gary, very interesting fellow. And this is Gordon Cooper, and next to him is Jacques Vallée, and then you have Dr. Alan Hynek is here, Kurt Waldheim, that's Grenada Prime Minister Gary. This is 31 years ago. The UN has basically not done anything, though there have been some rumors lately that meetings are being held there, as they should be. But these are the kinds of people that absolutely should be listened to by every media in the world, and they weren't in an appropriate fashion by any degree because of the truth embargo. Right? Now, probably no one in the world has done more to consolidate, to bring out, and put forward and raise in the public's mind the emergence of these witnesses than Dr. Stephen Greer, who spoke yesterday through the Disclosure Project. Absolutely. This is a major, I mean, he's been involved in the issue going all the way back forever, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the Disclosure Project and this witness program is a major historical event, an accomplishment. And it hit a high watermark in May 9th of 2001 when 21 witnesses were brought to the National Press Club for a major press conference, the largest there to date that I'm aware of. I believe that's what we were told. There were 200 people in the room that day. There were 100 press, though the local Washington Post reporter said there was just 100 people in the room, but he obviously couldn't count very well. And 17 camera crews that are sitting off to the back here way behind the audience. And the testimony of, I think about 75 witnesses was presented in consolidated form by a videotape, and 21 witnesses testified right there in brief, each one saying that they would repeat all of that under oath before the U.S. Congress. This event could have led to something big, no question about it. The news media was responding. ABC News got in touch with me and said they wanted 6 witnesses presented. Of course, I passed that on to Dr. Greer. He then provided 6 witnesses for ABC to vet, and they actually started that process. This was for Nightline. And other media, particularly international media, were starting to sort of crank up. It's not like they could just jump in the pool. They had to put their toe in first, but they were climbing in the water. But then, 4 months later, almost to the day, 9/11 happened. And it is the custom in our societies that when something like that happens, everything stops. Everything's put aside, right? I think that's a huge mistake. I think you deal with it, you deal with everything else too, and you move on. You can't be pushed back because, you see, there's always mischief going on in the world, right? There's always somebody that's going to blow something up, invade some country, start a genocide. Bad behavior is still around. It could have been. Either way, it's still bad behavior. And so, I'm not saying it's not or it is, not my issue, but it had the effect of tabling the ability to bring the UFO issue. It set us back without question. Had that not happened, I believe that the press conference of May 9, 2001 could have led to a series of media events which would have possibly brought disclosure under the first term of the Bush administration, though it would have been very, very difficult. Nevertheless, the witnesses kept coming forward, and then in November 12th of 2007, a similar event took place. This one was put together by James Fox, who is a documentarist. I believe his documentary made with Tim Coleman, Out of the Blue, is the best ever done on this subject. They did a revised version recently, and he has a new documentary coming out called I Know What I Saw. I think it has a chance to go theatrical on the big screens. James Fox, in conjunction with the Coalition on Freedom of Information and Leslie Kean, brought extraordinary witnesses again to the National Press Club and again held a very important conference. What was notable, that was moderated by a well-known politician, Fife Symington, from a well-known political family. And what was notable, particularly about this event, was the 13 witnesses were mostly international and people of extraordinary stature. Wilfred de Broer, Major General from Belgium. Claude Pola, engineer, astronomer, and astrophysicist, who I think was in that meeting, if I'm not mistaken, at the UN in 1978. And Jean-Charles Dubac, the Air France captain and pilot, who is here and be presenting and has the Exopolitics French website. And Dr. Jean-Claude Rebus, the astrophysicist with the National Institute of Astronomy. Parviz Jafari, the general in the Iranian Air Force that was part of that extraordinary event where the plane was disabled as it approached the UFO. Rodrigo Garito, captain pilot, Chilean Army. And then Santa Maria Huertas, commander Peruvian Air Force, and so forth. I think you can see this is an extraordinary group. They got significant press coverage, and the news cycle lasted for a while and then sloped off and we moved on. But again, this event is made possible by the effort of the Disclosure Project, Dr. Greer, 6 years earlier, and there will be more press conferences. The witnesses are continuing to come forward. It is relentless. It will not stop. This is the full group, including Fife Symington, who is the moderator, and notable because Fife Symington was the governor of Arizona in 1997, and he made fun of the Phoenix Lights event, and it was a notable thing. He made a laughing thing of it. And then, 10 years later, to James Fox, he confessed that he regretted that, and in fact, he saw the first event that night in Phoenix in 1997 where the Triangle craft flew right over him. And he as a pilot, he was confident that it was absolutely not a human craft. And it took great courage for Fife Symington to do this. So he moderated this conference. There's Leslie Kean, and James Fox is over here. Now, the final thing, and probably the most profound pressure being brought on the truth embargo, right, is from other nations, without question. The United States was the great superpower, yes. But over time, its power has diminished, and the world is asserting itself as it should be. And the truth embargo, which was initiated by the United States, other nations went along for various reasons. I don't want to argue with their thinking, but they're breaking ranks with the U.S., and the last 10 years that has accelerated. And without question, the most notable country in this case is France. In 2000, a group of individuals, all with substantial government connections and former employment in the French military and elsewhere, produced a report. Now, this was non-governmental, but you can be assured that the French government was behind this, right? But they didn't want to do it directly because that would create some diplomatic problems. And so, les ovnis et la défense. UFOs and defense, what should we prepare for? Robert Fleischer has been talking about this, and others, of course. It was covered a little bit in the U.S. thanks to Leslie Kean, but not that much by the press. But it got a lot of attention in Europe. And, again, the people involved, I mean, this is not some French citizens getting together to express their views about ETs. This is General Denis Letty, right, of the French Air Force. This is Bruno Lemoyne, an Air Force general. This is Marc Merlot, a Navy admiral, a French Navy admiral. Michael Alguin, an attorney. Jean Douglas, an engineer. Biscon, a weapons engineer. And then the chief of the National Police, Dennis Blanchard. Christian Marshall, the chief mining engineer, and so forth. This is non-trivial. And this was a message sent from France to the U.S. through the press, and they couldn't have made it clear because the key summation of this report was this sentence. A single hypothesis sufficiently takes into account the facts and, for the most part, only calls for present-day science. It is the hypothesis of extraterrestrial visitors. These French military academics and security people are saying UFOs are extraterrestrial. Hello? And then they also said this. I don't know how clear the message could be, but in diplomatic language. Thus, it would appear natural that in the mind of the U.S. military leaders, secrecy must be maintained as long as possible. Only increasing pressure from public opinion, possibly supported by the results of independent researchers, by more or less calculated disclosures, or by a sudden rise in UFO manifestations, might perhaps induce U.S. leaders and persons of authority to change their stance. Boy, that says it pretty clearly, doesn't it? Now, I don't know what the ETs are going to do, right? But I know that the public can do a lot, and we're doing everything we can to get the public opinion to exert the pressure that this report suggests and end this truth embargo. And, of course, this conference, your presence, and the media's presence from around Europe is testimony that, of course, that's exactly what's happening. Now, but other countries have clearly made statements that we're getting on the disclosure train. Very significantly, the United Kingdom starts releasing classified UFO files in 2003 in step fashion. Every few months, another batch, generating another news cycle. Very wise, very smart. That's been going on now for 6 years, thousands and thousands of UFO files. Then Mexico in 2004 released a report and the evidence of a possible sighting, may not have been a UFO, but whatever, in a very formal way in a press conference in Mexico City to Mexican researchers, including Jaime Maussan. The message there was to the U.S. It wasn't about whether that particular sighting was UFO or not UFO. It was, look, there's no way we could do this unless the Minister of Defense of Mexico and the President Vicente Fox had approved it. So, hello? Then Canada, Paul Hellyer in 2005 attends a symposium, and based upon his assessment, he's a very smart man, and a former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, comes forward and says, this is real. This is real as the planes in the sky. And Roswell was real. And I've confirmed it with an American general that I know. That took great courage, and Paul is still pressing the issue. He's a great man. And then Canada, a little more quietly than the United Kingdom, started releasing UFO files in 2006, and thousands of those files have been released. Then Brazil, in 2005, formally begins cooperation with UFO researchers there This was an accomplishment of A.J. Gavard, a very important person in South American research, and continues to do tremendous work, and then started their own document release in 2006, a recent announcement. More documents are about to come out. Again, that can't happen without the formal approval of the Minister of Defense of Brazil and the President of Brazil. Then Denmark releases documents in 2009, earlier this year. Sweden had been releasing documents that became a little better known recently, but they've been doing it for 3 years, thousands of documents. And an article appeared in Russia Today. Zavodnya Pressa reports, as of 2 days ago, that the Russian Navy has just started releasing classified documents regarding UFO sightings, primarily from Navy ships and primarily involving submerged vehicles. So Russia, it appears, is about to get on the disclosure train. More countries are expected. And all of this time, the United States has done absolutely nothing. Now, in this regard, I want to mention something else that I think is notable, and Paula talked about this. There is a new venture that is starting right now. It's underway right now. And it is Open Minds Productions, which includes a television show and a magazine, both of high quality. A brand new studio has been built, and people are being hired to take this issue out. But what's notable, and why I'm bringing it up in this context, is it is being created by a Phoenix businessman and entrepreneur in full partnership with this man, Jaime Maussan. Jaime Maussan is the best-known journalist and researcher in UFO phenomena in the Spanish-speaking world, without question. All right? I do not know the exact status of this issue in Spain in terms of the awareness, interest, and what have you, but in the Spanish-speaking world, the issue in Central America, Mexico, and South America is growing incredibly fast, in much regard to, as a result of Jaime Maussan's work. He has acquired thousands of videos that are being taken all over Central America and some now in South America. And the interest in the subject there, amongst that, I forget, 800 million people, is growing very rapidly. And Jaime Maussan is a full partner in this. And this activity will be, of course, international, and is going to be clearly presented aggressively to the entire Spanish-speaking world, including Spain. Now, as part of the ramp-up, they have already hired Maurizio Beata of Italy to edit the magazine. He has a reputation of creating extraordinarily fine, high-quality magazines. They have just hired Antonio Huneeus, who was involved in some of the UN work back there, a long-time journalist and researcher. He's back in the game and wants to say hello to everybody. And also, Paula Harris is going to be contributing to this magazine. They are building a multilingual, there's like 6 languages represented there. They're building a multilingual team to create this a show and magazine that will go to the United States and everywhere else, particularly into the Spanish-speaking world. This is, of course, another example of what's going on. Now, let's get to the meat. Let's get to why I believe things are about to happen. A very important event took place in 1993. It has come to be called the Rockefeller Initiative. It was not covered at the time. It was virtually ignored. But it didn't go away thanks to many people, the principals that were there, of course, many of whom are still living, but also this gentleman, an unassuming researcher from Canada named Grant Cameron, and a colleague of mine. He took a hold of the issue of UFOs and the U.S. presidents, created a website called presidentialufo.com, and started archiving everything he could about this connection between U.S. presidents and UFOs. And also did something very important. He filed a Freedom of Information Act request of information in the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the Clinton administration. He filed this in 2000, asking for everything regarding UFOs, the Rockefeller Initiative, and so forth, and got lucky. They were asleep at the switch or whatever. He got back 1,000 pages of documents confirming everything. And, of course, we have been working with those for some time, and they form the backbone of the confirmation of the Rockefeller Initiative, and the Rockefeller Initiative forms the backbone of the political process underway now, which I believe leads to disclosure. The principles in the Rockefeller Initiative, an attempt by Lawrence Rockefeller to make Bill Clinton the disclosure president. Right? Actually, it would have been whoever won that election, but Bill Clinton won, so he got approached. They were, of course, Lawrence Rockefeller, his attorney Henry Diamond, C.B. Scott Jones, military intelligence, Army, Dick Farley, a journalist working for C.B. Scott Jones, and the head of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. John Gibbons. These were the key principles in dealing with that engagement by Rockefeller of the Clinton administration that went on for 3 years. But there were two other principles involved that are pretty well known to you. This gentleman, President Bill Clinton, and this woman, First Lady Hillary Clinton. Now, while all of this went on for 3 years, there were other principles involved, secondary principles that are referred to in these documents. They include Webster Hubbell, the appointed Associate Attorney General at the time, Melvin Laird, former Secretary of Defense, Claiborne Pell, Senator Claiborne Pell, Senator Patty Murray, and the Secretary of Air Force, Sheila Widnall. Now, while all this was going on, there were people watching it that knew it was happening and were paying attention. I call them the watchers, and they are these people. One, the vice president during the Rockefeller Initiative, Albert Gore. A key advisor to President Clinton and his eventual chief of staff, John Podesta. A close friend of the Clintons, a member of Congress who went on to become his Secretary of Energy and the ambassador to the UN, now governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. The congressman from New Mexico, Stephen Schiff, and the chief of staff to Bill Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative, Leon Panetta. You may know some of these people. You may have heard their names. They knew about the Rockefeller Initiative. They saw it going on. They have never talked about it since, though Stephen Schiff has passed on. Now, there were many researchers involved at various times and points in various ways. Again, it was a 3-year process. Just to give you a quick run-through, and there may be some people missing here, but the researchers included Don Berliner, Antonio Huneeus, the late Dr. Richard Hall, he died just a few days ago, Robert Teets, the late Dr. John Mack, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, Linda Moulton Howe, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Colin Andrews, Victoria Alexander, and Carl Flock. A lot of PhDs in there, and there were other people. There was a meeting at Rockefeller's Ranch of these researchers to plan strategy, right? But there were other meetings at Rockefeller's Ranch, and the people that attended, I left out Dr. Richard Boylan as well. The people that attended that meeting, that met with Rockefeller at his ranch, were Bill and Hillary Clinton during that period, 1995. And we know this because we have news articles confirming it. This is one from the New York Times. But we've also got the photos of Hillary there in 1995 with Lawrence Rockefeller. And down here is a difficult photo to see. This is Bill Clinton at the ranch with Lawrence Rockefeller, close friend of the family. And this is Lawrence Rockefeller with Bill Clinton in the Oval Office. Lawrence Rockefeller, a billionaire son of John D., was trying to get Bill Clinton to be the disclosure president. An effort had been going on for 2 years. I think that when Bill and Hillary Clinton came to his ranch, I think that subject came up and was discussed. Again, she and Bill Clinton have never been asked about it or said a thing about it since then. Now, in addition to presidentialufo.com, I have a section at my website, paradigmresearchgroup.org, devoted to the Rockefeller Initiative, where you can see much of this. But more importantly, 173 of the key documents are there as well. There is a thumbnails page that goes on way down here. And then you click and you can go and read the key Rockefeller Initiative documents and see this whole thing unfold. Now, I can assure you that a billionaire approaching a president formally through an executive office of the White House is big news, and it was not covered. That's all you need to know about truth embargo. All right? But thanks to the internet, we've got it all. And so it isn't going away, and it will be covered. All right? Now, but there are two documents that are of note. Now, you cannot read these, but but I just want to mention these, and these are up there, and these will definitely be playing a role in the coming weeks. This is a letter from Jack Gibbons to Lawrence Rockefeller. Or rather, I'm sorry, this is a letter from Lawrence Rockefeller to John Gibbons, and it starts off with this very interesting sentence. Dear Jack, attached are a draft letter to the President, which Lawrence may have been from his attorney. Lawrence has been discussing with Mrs. Clinton and her staff, and to a draft report on the best evidence about UFOs. Well, there you go. Hillary Clinton and her staff were involved in the Rockefeller Initiative. And then, next year, in 1996, there's a letter from Lawrence Rockefeller to Jack or John Gibbons, the head of OSTP. And down here in the fourth paragraph, it says, you indicated that you will keep the First Lady's office informed, and we shall as well. Okay. So, Rockefeller Initiative happened. Major people were involved. The press did not cover it. We have the record. And so that is the basis for the political media engaging the issue now, right? Leon Panetta went on to become the CIA director. Bill Richardson, still the governor of New Mexico, but he ran for president. He was a significant candidate, could have been picked as vice president. Bill Clinton, of course, is a major power in the Democratic Party and clearly part of the administration in one way or another. This is non-trivial. And none of these people have ever been asked a single question about the Rockefeller Initiative. This is key. So I believe, my assessment is that when the Democrats lost the election in 2000, they made the decision that when they got in power again, they were going to execute the disclosure event. They were going to do what Rockefeller wanted them to do. It couldn't happen in 93 to 96. All right? And there's a reason, there's another factor here, and I'll talk about that in a second. So things started happening after Bill Clinton leaves office on January the 20th, 2001. And one of the most notable was that in the summer of 2002, the Sci-Fi Channel starts ramping up a major production about the abduction phenomena backed by Steven Spielberg called Taken. And they made the decision to literally create a non-governmental organization to address the issue using their money as kind of a goodwill gesture and a positive thing, but also to help promote this huge miniseries. In fact, it's one of the largest miniseries ever. And so they created, in the late summer, fall of 2002, the Coalition for Freedom of Information, and held a press conference October 22, 2002, which I attended, and the first person that spoke was John Podesta. Remember him? And it was there that he made the statement about releasing all UFO documents that Paola referred to. And they also announced that his brother's PR firm, keeping it in the family, was going to represent the Coalition for Freedom of Information. So you might say that Podesta was clearly getting on the disclosure train. They also hired a K Street law firm to represent. This is big time. They've spent between $500,000 and $1 million pursuing this issue in Washington. And at that press conference, repeating what you heard earlier, John Podesta made this fateful statement. I'm sure he knew it was going to be preserved and it was going to be around. I think he's a very, very smart man. He knew exactly what he was doing. And it was then that he said, I think it's time to open the books on the questions that have remained in the dark on the questions of government investigation of UFOs. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law. And he also restated this again at another press conference in 2003, where he added, it is time for the governments to declassify records that are more than 25 years old and to provide scientists with data that will assist in determining the real nature of this phenomenon. This is a significant thing that happened then, but it wasn't all that happened, right? John Podesta, 13 days after he made that statement in October of 2002, announced the creation of the Center of American Progress, a left-of-center progressive think tank, which is now a big deal in Washington. It was created deliberately to counter the influence of the Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, and now it's a major player. And he raised $20-some million in commitments to do it, and the principal funder was this man, George Soros, the largest backer of the Democratic Party for the last 12 years. He made a fortune in currency arbitrage. He was in 2005, the 28th richest person in the world with $7.2 billion. Whatever you think of George Soros, know this. He escaped Germany with his family, had a very interesting past, suffered, and then became very successful. He is trying to give back because for the last 25 years, his number one issue, which he has tried to spread by creating organizations all over the world, is this: open, transparent government. Does that sound familiar to you? All right. So, then, in 2004, this gentleman, remember him, Bill Richardson, writes a foreword to a book called The Roswell Dig Diaries, in which he states this: the mystery surrounding this crash at Roswell has never been adequately explained, not by independent investigators and not by the U.S. government. Whoa! He just said that it hasn't been explained. The Air Force says it has. He has just contradicted the United States Air Force. It would help everyone if the U.S. government disclosed everything it knows. With full disclosure, there's that word, and our best scientific investigation, we should be able to find out what happened on that fateful day in July of 1947. The American people can handle the truth. Remember what Podesta said? No matter how bizarre or mundane and contrary to what you see in the movies. Bill Richardson was getting on the disclosure train. The Democrats were fully convinced they were going to win that election in 2004. They were turning out huge numbers of voters, new voters, because the Democrats felt that the Bush administration was not going all that well. But the Republicans, very good themselves, countered that voter registration drive with their own, a voter registration drive primarily based around the gay marriage issue. And they won that election in Ohio. And so the Democrats were kept out of office for 4 more years. And you didn't hear any more about this from Podesta or Bill Richardson, right? Understandable. But I, again, believe that they had made the commitment at some deeper level in the Democratic Party that they were going to disclose when they get back in office. And that, of course, brings us to the next election. But before we go there, we have to go here. Everybody know what that is? You know what that is, right? They sell these all over the world, don't they? Cracker Jacks? You know Cracker Jacks, yes? Oh, I hope so. Cracker Jacks, been around forever. You get a prize, in them. You get the little soy surprise. So there is a reason, there is something in this for everybody, and that's an important thing. Why is that so? Look, right now the average person out there is working hard and losing ground. People are worried about their pension, their job, their house, right? We have a major economic crisis, and so it's perfectly appropriate for anybody to say, look, ETs, disclosure, whatever, what's in it for me, right? Why should I care? I got a lot of trouble here. Well, there is a prize in all of this, and it has been talked about already. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I want to reemphasize it. There is a prize. This is very significant. And it is this. I'm going to back up to that. It is, of course, the technology, the ET technology. It's this simple, right? Simple logic. The evidence is compelling that the United States, if not other governments, have crashed vehicles, shot down or crashed ET vehicles. And who will tell me that the government simply buried them in the ground and didn't spend every dollar it could to try to understand everything they could from those vehicles? Of course they did. And they've been spending billions for 60 years trying to understand the propulsion system, trying to understand the energy system. And I think we can safely assume that both of those are new physics. And we have to have that physics. We have pushed things to the limit. We need new technology. I know it would be nice if we could all just go live in the countryside and grow a little garden and take the pressure off the world. But that's not going to happen. We have to have technological solutions. And as long as the truth embargo is in place, that technology is not coming out. It sits in government labs, deep down, being researched, possibly for weapons use, but not for lowering your energy cost by 99%, not for making it possible to feed, clothe, and irrigate land and solve human condition. It is there for government purposes only. And until the truth embargo ends, that technology is not going to come out. That's the reason why there's something in it for everyone. Now, a little side note, right? In 2004, remember that ramp up I was telling you about? All right? The Podesta comes out, calls for the release of all UFO documents, does it again. Bill Richardson comes out. In 2004, before the election, another press conference was held at the National Press Club. I attended. Every group left of center in the United States was there to back a new big program called the New Apollo Project, right? And the idea was simple. Huge money was going to be spent like an FDR New Deal from the 1930s on green technology of every conceivable kind. This was going to generate huge new businesses, technology, jobs, and rebuild the American economy. It was going to turn everything around. And it was called the New Apollo Project. It would be like the Apollo Project, which in 6 years put someone on the moon. It was a very big program. And that was they were going to do it if they won the election. But they didn't win the election. And so they shelved it. They took the idea and they put it over on a website called theapolloalliance.org. Now, here is a picture of Hillary Clinton, and who was kind of speaking, right, during the election, right? This is going back. And this is a brief mention here. She has the Apollo Alliance in the background. She's talking about clean energy. That was their idea. And I firmly believe at the heart of the New Apollo Project, which they couldn't say then, was in addition to funding a massive new creation of green technology and businesses that will change not only America but the world, they were going to bring the ET tech into it, right? That would be the ACE in the whole, A standing for alien. It's a big plan, and I think it would have worked, but they lost that election. When they got back in, the economy collapsed. Trillions had to be thrown into the banking industry, and so they have downplayed this green revolution. But understand, this press conference was another indicator that something big was afoot. Okay, now, starting in 2007, as we ramp toward the present, things start picking up. All right? We start having a whole series of events, one after another, which create a news cycle. And these news cycles were then overlapping the next news cycle. Right? So you have kind of a building sense here. How am I doing? I'm doing pretty good. There was in January the very significant sighting over the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Then in March of 2007 is when Fife Symington came forward and reversed what happened, and reversed his statements in 1997 and acknowledged that he saw that craft and he was sure it was extraterrestrial. Then the French files release got underway in large measure in March of 2007. The UK file released at the same time. The CIA files, this is a little-known thing, but the CIA released a bunch of files called the Crown Jewels. Not UFO-related, but very controversial, and people were quite shocked that the CIA did this. That came out in June. Then Paul Hellyer, in October of 2007, makes his statements in Toronto at the symposium. Then there were the questions asked of Dennis Kucinich and Bill Richardson at the October 30 Philadelphia Democratic debate in 2007. Those questions are on the internet. You can find them. You can look at them. And then there was the CIS, the Coalition of Freedom of Information press conference that was held in November 12th of 2007. And then there was a verbal flap in Japan when a high-level official in Japan made a kind of matter-of-fact statement about the existence of extraterrestrials, and boy, there was a firestorm going on in Japan, and the Prime Minister had to step in. Then there was the Stephenville sighting when a significant event occurred near the Crawford Ranch, the presidential home in Crawford, Texas. A significant sighting created a very significant news cycle and still going on to this day. Jeff Peckman got a tremendous amount of exposure, activist exposure on this issue, including the David Letterman show, on his ballot initiative in Denver. That all took place in May, continues. And then in May of 2008, the Vatican announced through Gabriel Funes, the head astronomer, that they've got no trouble with extraterrestrials, reinforcing what Monsignor Carrara Beducci had been saying for about 10 years. Then Larry King Live in July starts a series of programs, one after another, on UFOs, particularly, including some exopolitics stuff, bringing on 4 or 5 witnesses at a time, including Edgar Mitchell and others. And then Dr. Edgar Mitchell appears on the Kerrang radio in UK and restates his assertions about the ET presence, but to an audience hearing it for the first time.
The Kerrang radio is owned by Bauer Conglomerate, a big German company. So when they put out a press release about it, it explodes in Europe, right? If you go to my website, you can see an archive of the 50 articles written about his comments that day on Kerrang radio, as well as the interviews. There's about 10 video interviews there. He got 200 interview requests. He had to turn most of them down. And the news cycle ended. And then more UFO files released by the UK in October of 2008, and it was this file release that brought out the Milton Torres case, where he was asked as an Air Force pilot in 1957 to shoot down a UFO. Now, before we get to the final wrap-up here, I want to quickly run through the presidents, just to give you a perspective. President Truman almost certainly knew what was going on. He was briefed. He was aware of Roswell. He may have been behind the decision of Roger Ramey to change the Roswell event story to a weather balloon. Eisenhower was fully informed, without question. Whether he had a meeting with an ET, don't know for sure, but there's a lot of research on that. I don't think anybody's surprised that he was fully informed. John Kennedy, I don't think was given a full briefing. I think he was given limited information, but John knew. One way or another, he knew the ET presence was real. Exactly how much he was shown, we don't know. There is work, Grant is working on it and others, trying to find out if there was any connection between his assassination and his thinking or intentions regarding the UFO issue. I hope one day we learn the whole story. I don't believe that Gerald Ford was told anything. In fact, I think he was punished because he was the principal player in bringing forth a congressional hearing in 1966. I don't think the military intelligence people were happy about that. So I don't think Gerald Ford was told anything. Jimmy Carter was not given a briefing, but he did try to look into this issue. One of the individuals that was a principal to that attempt, Alfred Weber, is here. Another individual that was a principal to that attempt, Daniel Sheehan, has spoken out about this. He then shut down on the issue completely. Those studies were shut down. He has avoided the subject as much as possible since. And then Ronald Reagan, a very interesting situation there. I don't believe he was given a full briefing, but I think he was tipped or knew that the ET presence was real. I think it was brought to his attention as part of the process of selling the SDI program to him, meaning, it's not just the Soviets we need to create these missiles for, but we got an ET thing going on here too, and so it's 2 for 1. This is one of the reasons why he kept mentioning ETs frequently and talked about, well, if we have an ET presence, then we all should get together, and drove his advisors crazy. But I don't think he was fully briefed. This man, I don't believe was briefed, but of course, I think he would have liked to got into the issue. And I think when Rockefeller approached him, it set off alarm bells all over the military intelligence community. And then there is this gentleman. I don't believe he was briefed either. Now, let me make a very important point. One of the reasons why, in spite of all the pressures that I've talked about, and the huge public awareness and everything else, that we did not get disclosure between 1993 and 2008 is kind of basic. I believe that neither this gentleman or this gentleman were acceptable to the military intelligence management of the ET issue, which is down in the basement of the House of State, to be the disclosure president. Let's be clear. From the standpoint of those who are concerned about national security, the disclosure event is a very big deal, extremely complicated. It has to go well. And one of their concerns was they had to have the right president in the White House to make sure that it went well. And this president had to be someone who was willing to be aware of their concerns and address their concerns and be able to work with them, have the ability to deal with it. Bill Clinton was utterly unacceptable to be the disclosure president, which is why the Rockefeller Initiative, I don't think, could possibly have worked. He was not liked at all by the military intelligence community. They warmed up a little toward the end, but it simply was not there. And whatever happened, they were not going to allow it to take place. And George Bush was not acceptable either. Even though he is his father's son, he did not have the intellectual capacity to deal with this issue, and they knew it. Plus, he had... I'm not trying to be partisan here. He had broken with his father. There was significant breaches with his father. And the Iraq War cemented those breaches. And there were significant breaches because he had made the intelligence community to some degree a scapegoat for 9/11 and other things. He had come into his presidency primarily on the evangelical vote. His father was not into that. So the connection was not strong enough back to his father, who, by the way, would have been fine as the disclosure president, but he lost that election in 1992. And so it wasn't going to happen under George Bush either, which meant that when we have the election in 2008, 62 years after Roswell, with the pressure mounting, if the next president was acceptable, it's time to go. And we knew, I believe, it was clear as early as 2007 that whoever won was going to be acceptable. John McCain, Hillary Clinton, or Barack Obama. Which brings us to Barack Obama. Is he acceptable to the military intelligence community? Yes. Why? One, as he pursued his campaign, he moved to the center. He had the right things to say regarding the wars. He appointed, he kept Robert Gates at the Department of Defense. He brought in, oh Lord, my mind is going blank. He brought in Admiral Brer to be a key advisor on national security, and he brought in James, the Marine Commandant, as his national security advisor. These are people the military intelligence community can work with. He has said the right things. He also clearly has the intellect to deal with the post-disclosure issues. But he has several other very important traits, and they are these. Look, if you're the U.S. president that has to go to the rest of the world and say, look, here's the deal. There's an ET presence. My government has known about it for 62 years. We haven't acknowledged it, but we're doing it now, all right? And you're going to want to have to say that. It would be helpful if you were popular. And as it happens, Barack Obama entered the office the most popular international president, internationally, in American history. It also, if you are the president of the United States and you have to go to the world and say that, right, and then deal with all of the foo-fa that takes place. Well, I wonder if foo-fa translates. It just so happens that world you're going to be talking to is mostly brown. And so it would not hurt if the president was brown. All right? Significant asset. So, this man is acceptable. So the question is, what's going to happen? Well, what we're seeing is significant evidence that there is an attempt to get this done. The appointment of John Podesta as his transition co-chief. The emphasis throughout the campaign on open, transparent government. On the day after he was elected, the first thing he did was sign 2 memorandums, presidential memorandums, and a presidential directive. One of those presidential memorandums called for open, transparent government, openness through all the agencies on behalf of the people. All right? He signed a presidential directive that was designed to improve the Freedom of Information Act, to expand it, to make it more user-friendly, and also to make it more in favor of the people that are trying to get the truth out of the government. These are clear statements that he's tried to do something. And remember, you've got George Soros, the major, single largest funder of the Democratic Party. His issue is open, transparent government, and he founded or funded, chief funder of the Center for American Progress. And so, with all of that in play, and all of this prelude, right, believing that Barack could be the person, that this is the time, PRG made its move. And in October, it announced that it would launch on November the 5th a Facts on Washington campaign. The idea is simply this. Get the message to the president. Get the message to the media that we're ready. We're ready. We want it now. Let's get it done. Right? Before somebody blows something up or invades a country or does something stupid, let's get it done. And so on November the 5th, factsonwashington.org, that website went up with the key talking points to start sending letters during the 77 days of the transition to the transition headquarters of the new president-elect and to his senatorial office. Thousands of letters and emails poured in during that 77 days. And then we went to phase 2. That started on inauguration, January 20. And for the next 131 days, the letters were directed to the White House. Letters, faxes, emails. Thousands of them have been pouring in, calling for disclosure, calling for the release of that technology, calling for congressional hearings, calling for the president to be briefed fully. Right? Meaning if the member of the military or the intelligence community says, Mr. President, I can't talk about that because you don't have a right to know, he says, you're fired. Next. And then that person comes in and says, Mr. President, you're not on a need-to-know basis. He says, you're fired. Next. Until he gets the person in front of him that says, what do you want to know? That's what these letters are saying. And then... And then on April the 20th, after the X conference in Washington, we held a fairly important press conference at the National Press Club. And the key to that conference was Dr. Edgar Mitchell. How many minutes? Okay. I may need a couple. Dr. Edgar Mitchell did something he had never done before. At the National Press Club, in front of quite a few media, including CNN, which live streamed that press conference worldwide to its websites, Dr. Mitchell called for President Obama to end the truth embargo, to acknowledge the extraterrestrial presence. It doesn't get any clearer than that. And there was someone else there with him, Milton Torres, the major, Air Force major who was asked to shoot down a UFO and was allowed to talk about it when the UK released the file. He called for the president to do that. And then I basically said, look, we tried to get a message to the president. You need to disclose soon. Hopefully no later than May 31, because if you don't, this truth embargo is going to become your truth embargo. Your name is going to be on it, and you'll have to explain why you didn't disclose this information, and your open, transparent government reform will collapse. It will be turned to ash. You need to do it. I didn't think they would. They didn't. And so we started Phase 3. And Phase 3 is a different ballgame. In Phase 3, we shift. The website changed, faxandwashington.org, and the target changed from the White House second floor to the West Wing. This is Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Milton Torres, again, who made that. What is happening now is thousands of letters, faxes, and emails are pouring into the White House press corps. You see them there, standing outside of the West Wing. I've been in that press room many, many times. These are good people, right? I think they want to do the right thing. But they've lived their entire lives under the truth embargo. They've never known anything else. And they can't bring themselves to ask the obvious questions. And so the letters and faxes are pouring in to the White House Correspondents Association, in other words, White House Press Corps, care of. And at the faxandwashington.org website, there's a list of the key political questions that refer to Obama and Podesta and Richardson and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and all the political connections that I talked about, which are fully legitimate news issues, and saying, suggest they ask this question or that question. All right? And all we need is a couple of those reporters or their political counterparts at the Department of State or the CIA, Leon Panetta, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, to ask a few appropriate questions. And if they do, I believe it will launch a media storm that will bring the truth embargo down in a couple of days. Now, there's something that happened just 2 days ago, which is so cool. Hang on a second. I'm going to bring this up. There it is. A supporter of PRG, who I've been talking to for some weeks, called me up and said, Robert Gibbs, the press secretary, is going to be on C-SPAN in the morning. And wouldn't it be great if we could get a question to him? Again, Robert Gibbs is the man who briefs the White House press corps 5 days a week. Right? He's fully aware that the correspondence is pouring into the White House. He's fully aware the correspondence is pouring into the White House press corps. And there he is. And he said, I'm going to get a question in. And I said, go for it, right? Do what you can. He did. Here it is.
We're going to hear from some of our viewers on these issues, and then I want to come back and talk a little bit about your own background and your job as White House press secretary. But Ryan is on the phone from Seattle. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. My question might seem a little bit silly, but it's very serious, and I was wondering if you could take it very seriously. There's a massive movement right now of hundreds of colonels and ex-CIA officials and Air Force pilots who are demanding that Obama administration live up to its promise of transparency and let the American truth know, let the American people know the truth about the existence of UFOs. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, an American hero who walked on the moon, has come out and over the past year had made some statements saying that he had to confirm to him that the Roswell crash indeed was not from this planet has been visited and the government has been covering it up. Now, during the transition and during your presidency, there's been hundreds and thousands of letters that have been mailed to your transition office led by Tom Podesta. And when are you going to, will you please, on behalf of all the citizens and these Americans, ask Obama and talk to him about making a statement or addressing this issue?
Ryan, we'll get a response. Thank you for the call from Seattle. Robert Gibbs.
Well, Ryan, I take your question seriously, not simply because of the topic, but also because if you're calling from Seattle and it's a little after 7 here, it's a little after 4 in the morning there. Look, I have not been briefed on whether or not there are the existence of UFOs. I haven't talked to the president about this topic. I know that the president is deeply concerned about ensuring that we have transparency in government and the American people have faith in what its government is trying to do.
We'll hear from Celia joining us from Market.
Now, look, hang on a second. Let me get my slideshow up. Okay. Look, Ryan was a little nervous. Okay, and obviously Robert Gibbs stepped around the question. But look, Ryan camped out on his phone at 4 in the morning, and he was going to get that question in, and he did, and that's what's important, right? Because asking questions of your political leaders is really important. Whether you ask them or the press asks them. And failure to ask the appropriate questions results in war and all manner of mayhem, right? And when you ask questions and get answers, you can avoid those things. And so when one Ryan asks a question like that, another one will step up and ask another. And understand, Gibbs knew that these letters are pouring into the White House and the press corps. And so Ryan's question was a reminder to him. You know, we know, and we're going to continue to ask, and you're eventually going to have to respond. And respond to these questions in an appropriate way. And they know what that means. And so it comes down to this. And these letters are pouring in from all over the world, by the way. Send a letter to the White House press corps. Send a letter to the White House. Copy the press corps with that letter. Ask, and you shall receive. The deal is this. This is a gate, Stargate in a sense. It's also a symbol of the transition we're going through. It's a birthing process. It's a coming of age, whatever it is. But it is a paradigm shift of extraordinary power, the most important in history. I like to think of it as a line in space that you're going to cross. Thomas Kuhn talked about paradigm shifts in physics and so forth, and we've borrowed that phrase. This is the mother of all paradigm shifts. The thing about it, though, it's kind of cool. Disclosure, formal disclosure, is that line that we have to cross. And when it happens, we all cross together, all of us, all 6 billion at the same time. No one crosses first, no one crosses last. We all cross that paradigm line at the same time. And then we are in a new era, and we will have a chance to build a new world. And in fact, I think disclosure may launch the most profound reformist era in human history, in which a full spectrum of institutions are going to be engaged by the people, and they're going to be reformed and made to work so that we can get out of this mess and get on with wherever we're going. Thank you for coming today. It's been a pleasure.
Puertas abiertas, ¿a 1 o 1:15?